think would be something that I've been starting a lot of the shows with. When I go out there and I do a little intro, and I get everybody going, warming up for Jordan, the idea that we're starting to win. And when I've been saying win, there's a feeling in the crowd of like, whoa, maybe all of this madness that we've all been talking about for all these years, maybe enough people have woken up now that there is something shifting. So I've brought that up a bunch, and you've sort of picked up on it on a couple of the shows and talked about why winning isn't necessarily the way we should view this, or what winning actually is. So I thought that would be a good place to kick us off here.
Well, it's more what winning actually is, you know, because one of the things that has to be contended with in the current situation is that, especially in the United States, but also in the rest of the Western world, there's a political divide. And Americans have been voting 50% Republican and 50% Democrat for 4 elections, pretty much split right down the middle. And there can't be any final victory by one side over the other because everyone has to live together. So the victory is, how can we continue to live together peacefully and productively? And we have to figure out the pathway forward to that. But then I think there's another kind of victory that's deeper than that, that's on the horizon, which is that I think the narrative that underlies our culture as a whole has to shift. And I started to think about this when I was working for a UN committee about 5 years ago. I worked on a committee on sustainability for the Secretary General, and I had a chance with the people that I was working for and with in Canada to rewrite the underlying narrative, because it was very pessimistic. It was a real Cold War narrative, North against South, and capitalists against socialists, and doom and gloom on the horizon. And it seemed to me to be outdated really by about 40 years. And I started to read a lot of the economic development and ecology literature, and mostly what I found was that things are getting better globally so fast and on so many different dimensions that it's almost inconceivable. And yet no one seems to know that. And in the aftermath of that, there's been about 6 books published in the last 5 years that, like Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now.
I think we got it right over here somewhere, yeah.
Right, but by no means, that's by no means the only book, detailing out a revolution in living standard progress and ecological progress, for that matter, around the world. So I think there's 2 victories to be had here. One is to pull everyone out of the pessimistic, apocalyptic, Cold War narrative that enveloped us for 4 or 5 decades, and to notice that the future could actually be bright if we were careful. And the second is to make sure that the political dialogue in the West doesn't polarize to the degree that we start doing things that are fatally stupid.
Yeah, all right, so let's talk about the second part first, because I think that's where we've really been focusing, the political part.
So it's interesting to note these 50-50 divides. I don't think that's a reason. I guess I have a strongly different take, and maybe it's the same. Yeah. We'll have to figure that out. To me, the 50-50 mark is going to more or less hold as long as these 2 parties can calculate what's the maximum they can, what's the minimum they have to give up to win an election. And so the key issue is, what does the 50-50 composition look like? And unfortunately, what it keeps looking like is the 2 parties becoming more and more nightmarish in my mind, and less trustworthy. So the 50-50 continues to hold, but what it represents as a tension.
The tension increases. Is
getting much worse. And so the key issue is that those of us who are sort of center, I mean, I don't love the left-right spectrum, but let's just use it as shorthand, that the center-left and the center-right have to see each other as our natural allies, and the center-left has to clean house and get rid of the nutty left, and the center-right has to get rid of the far-right. And that's the optimistic scenario. I think winning is incredibly important.
Okay, well, that's a good, interesting way of conceptualizing it.
Let me go a little bit further.
Yep, sure.
I think that we have to stop being apologetic about winning and what winning means. Winning means that the advanced guard of the radical center has to make this a safe and habitable space again. And so in order to do that, and the reason I try to focus most of my negative energy on the left is that it's my responsibility to clean house on the radical, bad progressive movement that is almost certainly going to fuel the far right. It's not efficient for me to go after the far right because, I mean, of course I'm going to be anti-Nazi and anti-skinhead, right?